Well, we are getting close. It is 2 o'clock, so let us kick off. We currently have a pretty darn full house, still people coming in. So today's event, TMMI, 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 and Agile, friends or foes. This is actually been an active conversation that I think many of us who are Agile practitioners, some of us are Agile and TMMi practitioners, some of us are just TMMi practitioners. It we are all facing, how do we make these things work together, or can they even? Today we have two really great resources to sort of debate this out and to actually have a really strong conversation about whether or not TMMi and Agile, whether or not they are people that can share the same room. Are they friends or foes? Rex, can you give us a quick overview of who Rex Black is and why you can actually be a subject matter expert on this?
So I'm Rex Black. I'm president of a company called RBCS, and we provide consulting, expert services, and training to our clients, thousands of clients around the world. I've been in the software engineering field since 1983, focused on testing since the early 90s, especially a lot of test automation and test management. I am a co-founder and past president of the ISTQB, which focuses on skills, tester skills, and also am now a co-founder and current president of TMMi North America. And I've written 14 books on the topic of software testing, and I guess I'm considered a subject matter expert. I sell myself as a subject matter expert. I've been an expert witness on a few cases, starting on number 5, I think now. So I guess people call me an expert, so I'll take that.
Yeah, you're
Super.
pretty good.
So debating the con position is Mark Summers. Mark.
All right. Everything Rex said, just add 1 year. And I got 1 more year. Got everything.
You'll notice I have a lot more hair than Mark, so I'm considerably younger.
Gloves are coming off already. So I'm Mark Summers. I'm the senior director of enterprise quality at Northwestern Mutual. I have 26 years of experience in structured software testing and quality assurance. The relevant experience to today's discussion is really somewhere around early 2000s. Started dabbling with maturity assessment framework. So right about when ISO 15504 or SPICE was coming to the States, started trying to apply that to the software testing discipline. Mildly successful doing that until about 2006 when TMMi emerged. And that's when I really got serious about it. And around 2006, taking TMMi and CMMi and leveraging those two things together to really drive continuous improvement, really drive software process improvement and testing improvements. Primarily for the companies I work for, but I also spent about 5 years as a road warrior performing assessments as a consultant for companies as well. I am also one of the founding members of TMMi America, vice president of TMMi. I'm an accredited TMMi lead assessor and also train other assessors.
Super. And I'm Tom Cagley. I am going to act as the moderator today. So my skills in my past don't matter. I'm here to make sure that Rex and Mark actually are focusing on delivering content, which is really our goal here. So just to give you a quick overview of the process, we're not going to do Menti this morning. The process today, each debater is going to have 2 minutes to state his case. We have 6 basic questions that we want to hit. And then each one will have a minute to rebut. This is really much closer to a classic debate kind of format. After each debater completes his rebuttal, I'm going to ask the audience if we should go for an additional minute or so, in this case, 3 minutes, to actually, continue down the conversational path. If yes, we'll add a couple of minutes and then we'll move on, right? So we're using sort of a modified lean coffee kind of format. So first up, we're going to, basically do 6 minutes on a topic. The topics that were put on the table start with the TMMi is too heavyweight to work in a dynamic environment. And so we'll start there. Rex, why don't you take this one away and you start with your position on this?
So it's certainly a perception that the way that you get TMMi compliance is by creating a lot of documents. And so, people sometimes think, oh, well, then it's all about documentation because I have to have this documents to evidence and deliver the evidence as part of the assessment. And therefore, we're in contradiction with the Agile principle that says that you should try to minimize documentation that doesn't add value. Now, this is a case of getting lost in the trees and not being able to see the forest. In a TMMi assessment, the main objective is to determine whether or not an organization and the testing processes within that organization satisfy the goals that are stated. You really need to focus on the goals. What are we trying to accomplish? So within each of the process areas, you have your specific goals and you've got your generic goals, and really need to say, okay, we're going to look at the practices within those goals, but the main focus has to be on the goals themselves. And so then we can change the way that we think about TMMi away from, well, it's checkbox exercise. You got to go down to the nitty gritty sub-practice level, and you're trying to check off all these boxes. I can do this, do that. I got paper that proves that I have. No, that is an approach to doing an assessment that's mechanistic and is focused on these sort of template-ish way of thinking about TMMi. But again, the main focus needs to be on the goals. And if we focus on those goals, there are multiple different ways of achieving them. And that allows us to be lightweight in our operation.
All right, thank you.
That bell was my 2 minutes.
It most certainly was. See, now we're actually doing what we say we're going to do. Okay, Mark, your position on this topic. The TMMi is too heavyweight.
Like usual, I disagree with Rex. And let me tell you about my health plan. Oh, wait, wrong debate. Okay, so with this TMMi too heavyweight for Agile, and I think the answer is definitely yes. It needs to be slimmed down. So we have over 80 goals associated with TMMi that assessors often try to apply in an Agile world. So 80 goals, close to 400 practices, close to 900 sub-practices. Yes, there's a focus on the goals, but to score the goals, you still got to go through all 400 practices to score an individual goal. So, or multiple practices to score a goal. So, with that, I think in a waterfall environment, like traditional TMMi spec, definitely very necessary, right? Because we have this long running project. At the end of the project, there are, we have very little room to have gotten it right. So I think all these controls and practices that we see within TMMi, it's necessary for us to assess that all those controls throughout the life cycle are in place. But in an agile environment, I would say only about a third of these things are even relevant in an agile environment, because we fail fast, we learn fast. We don't have to wait, a year, 6 months, a year before we find out if we're failing or not. So a lot of these controls that are in place today, a lot of these goals aren't even relevant in an agile environment. So for example, in waterfall, having test policies and test strategies, and I'm out of time. Give me some more time.
Nope. All right. So we've heard sort of an opening statement from both of our different positions. So Rex, why don't you have a minute to rebut Mark?
So again, I think that this is the getting lost in the trees and not seeing the forest problem. Yes, we can go through and count up all the sub practices and the practices and so forth. But remember, if you look at the TMMi guide, which is the guide to scoring a goal or practice, you are allowed to score a goal and or practice as largely or even fully achieved if a practice is in place that achieves what is intended. So there is discretion to the assessor to say, yeah, we're not doing exactly that, but we're doing this other thing, and it works out just as well. It's kind of like if you've got a recipe that calls for using butter and somebody in your house is lactose intolerant, you use olive oil, and that doesn't mean it's not the thing you wanted to cook.
All right.
So we got to retract the last 15 seconds, what he said, so he went over.
Mark?
All right. So I do understand that, and I agree with that to a certain extent. So what has happened is, instead of the TMMi coming out with an agile spec with the specific practices that are really relevant in the agile life cycle, they've come up with a more of a tailoring document. And that tailoring document gives way too much leeway for the skills and interpretation of the individual assessor. So whereas in traditional TMMi, it's very clear and concise, and you can measure and deliver this consistently across all assessors. So with this just kind of tailoring guideline from TMMi, too much room for interpretation. You could have, a bunch of assessors assess the same place and come up with many different results as far as a maturity score and, capability ratings.
All right. So should we, and this is a question to the participants, not the participants, of the people in the waiting room and who can't answer, and those that are listening. Should we go on another 2 minutes here, or should we go to the next? In the chat, please suggest what you think we should be doing. We've got 2 more minutes, please. All right. Okay, gentlemen. I see lots. Oh, I see two more. Keep going. All right, 2 more minutes on this one. So, Mark, you can go. Start here. 1 minute.
All right. So let me give you a really good example, because I've been, unlike Rex, who just inflicts his assessments on folks, I'm often on the receiving end. Just kidding, Rex. I'm often on the receiving end of an assessment. So for me, the ambiguity of the way the assessment is tailored, I'll get results back from an Agile assessment saying, okay, you don't have a test policy, a test strategy, a test plan, and a master test plan. So a large waterfall project, yep, completely appropriate to have all those things, because the TMMi is not specific enough an assessor can interpret that and tell me that I have failed to achieve a certain maturity level if I don't have a test strategy, test plan, and master test plan. You would never have all those in Agile.
Okay, Rex.
I
take us
just
home on this one.
go back to the, butter versus olive oil thing here. Yes, the assessor has discretion. The discretion is butter versus olive oil, not butter versus I don't know, liquefied skunk roadkill or something like that. I mean, that's that's a totally different thing, obviously, right? It's going to turn out pretty badly that way. So, this is assessors have to have certain qualifications. They have to be experts in terms of test process as well as TMMi. They should be able to recognize a reasonable substitution when they see it, and also recognize an unreasonable substitution when they see it. And that's, that's really what we want. We don't need something that's excessively prescriptive. I think we have enough guidance from the TMMi Foundation with that document, and we can make it go.
Super. Okay. So we're going to go to the next one. I know we probably could continue going back and forth, but I think you've taught us a lot, both of you, in terms of things to think about. So let us go to the next statement, and we'll let Mark kick this one off. The TMMi does not align well with Agile and DevSecOps processes. So, Mark, 2 minutes.
All right. I think you guys already know my feelings on this based on that last one. Testing's very different in DevSecOps. And, we have automated pipelines, a more focused, a heavier focus on unit, component, integration testing, right? We're continuing to shift further left than where we even did with, more traditional testing. So, as I look at that shift left and that focus, which is more on let's build more of our functional testing into integration, into the pipeline. So it's automated from the start. We're building quality into the start. TMMi Agile simply doesn't cover those aspects of testing. It doesn't get into the evaluation of component and integration and pipeline type concepts. We talk about DevSecOps. There's no real security focus on, delivering rapidly high quality software that, we can get out of applying to DevSecOps. So another example would be like TDD, BDD, ATDD frameworks, where again, we're driving that defect discovery and that functional testing further and further left. There's simply no goals and practices and TMMi Agile that are really addressing at that code quality level. So, yep, I think there needs to be significant enhancements to the spec.
Okay, perfect. 7 seconds early. Rex, your turn.
So now I'll just say, what Mark said before the first time. As usual, Mark is just totally wrong. And here's my immigration plan. No, wait, that's still different.
You're in Texas.
So if you focus just on levels 2 and 3, it can seem like TMMi is what Mark described, a sort of an end stage, focus on the testing that's traditionally associated with the application hardening activities that happen during system test and UAT in a waterfall or a traditional iterative life cycle like, say, RUP. But when you get up to levels 4 and 5, this gets all different, because when you look at the process areas of levels 4 and 5, they are all about shift left. Totally focused on shift left. The things like defect prevention is up there, right? And that's all about having like root cause analysis processes and taking corrective and preventive actions to make sure that you're doing things in the early stages of the life cycle. I'm working with a client right now doing an informal assessment, and they decided to look at where they were all the way up to level 5, even though they knew that they weren't going to be there. And it turns out that some of the things that they're doing in terms of things like root cause analysis and DevSecOps type of activities and so forth actually give them quite a head start if they were to decide in the long run to go for level 5. They were, for a company that's going to struggle to even hit level 2, they were surprisingly well positioned in some of the level 4 and 5 process areas. And I would credit that to the fact that they have a fairly active DevSecOps and root cause process that they have been putting in place. So again, if you're just focusing on levels 2 and 3, you're missing the bigger picture of where TMMi is ultimately going to take you, which is to the shift left world.
Righty, Mark, rebuttal.
Assuming you've read the TMMi spec at some point, Rex, I'm having a hard time telling, but so to be relevant within the eyes of the engineering, esthets and engineering folks, to be relevant, we got to focus on where in Agile we are finding quality issues. So it's not necessarily these functional issues anymore. We're finding, most of our quality issues are coming from our versioning and branching strategies, from security vulnerabilities. Maybe our infrastructure code is configured incorrectly, or we have some deployment type issue. And those practices aren't covered. Those goals, there are no goals or practices in the Agile framework that cover reviewing those capabilities.
Rex?
Well, I mean, I think you may have missed something at level 3 there, Mr. Summers, which is the non-functional testing. Non-functional testing deals with exactly that kind of stuff. And in fact, the assessment that I'm performing right now, one of the things that we looked at with regard to non-functional testing is focused on exactly what you were talking about. The whole deployment issue is does the deployment work properly? So again, this is a matter of, keeping the eye on the goals and not being distracted by the fine details. Stay focused on what the goals are telling you.
All right, so for this topic, we're done a little early. Is this one where we want to go another 2 minutes, or is this one done? I look forward to people letting us know in the chat. Oh, getting a lot of done. Next,
Yep.
Done. Next topic, please. Well, that was all caps, I think. All right, so we'll go to the next topic. All right. Thank you. The main output of the TMMi's paper, not functionality people can see and react to. Rex, start us.
Well, once again, going back to my original theme, it depends on how an organization goes about this. If the organization focuses on the sub-practices and the practices, and it's all about document to make sure that they can prove that they've done those things, then that's you're going to have this kind of problem. But if the focus is on the goals, what do we want the organization in its testing activities to be accomplishing, then that's all about enabling creating functionality that people can see and react to in this case in an Agile setting where there's a fast iteration going on. And we're making sure that all of the right test-related goals are being achieved across, within a single team, Agile team, but also across multiple teams. And you start to get into the issues of coordination and working cross-functionally, again, which are focused of levels 4 and 5. And actually helps address some of the siloing problems that you sometimes see in organizations that have adopted Agile. The level 4 and 5 process areas are going to push that organization with its suffering from those sprint silos, to get more cross-functional type of thinking that is going to support the achievement of those, not just testing goals, but the organization's quality goals, which are supposed to be the basis of the test policy.
I felt like 4 minutes. Moderator, I'm going to ask you to check your timer for the next one.
1 minute, 45 seconds, Mr. Summers.
I was agile.
Up to you, sir.
All right. Where I keep going back to is original TMMi spec, very well documented. So expectations around what it means to achieve a certain level of capability around your goals and your practices. Very specific set of examples and sub-practices, what we call informative practices. And very clear. And you get a really consistent outcome when you're assessing traditional, waterfall, even iterative, even RUP is, Rex mentioned earlier. But from an agile perspective, what I would like to see is TMMi create a separate spec specifically for agile. Their tailoring document that they have now doesn't come close to describing what we're really trying to assess, what those capabilities are, how they're really different from traditional development methodologies. And so taking and instead of having a tailoring document, having a separate spec is going to give us something that when we go and present the results back to an engineering community, it's going to be relevant, it's going to be actionable. Right now, I can tell you, I've been through 100 of these, and whenever I've seen someone attempt to deliver the results, they're talking about entry and exit criteria, they're talking about sign-offs on documents, and all these things that need to be tailored out and focused, for an agile environment, which it doesn't do today. You can stay on mute. It's okay.
Is it over to me, Tom?
It's over to you, sir.
Okay. So I will point out there that the audience should have noted that Mark was calling that in order to be more agile, the TMMi Foundation needed to create more paperwork, more documentation. So, I'm going to subject you to the classic 3-word firing squad of agile organizations. That's not agile. In all seriousness, though, I think this, getting caught up in entry criteria and exit criteria, as names, that's just definition of ready and definition of done by a different name, right? The sign-offs, rather than sign-offs, which I was never a big fan of anyway, how about just we agree on things in our daily stand-up meetings and other kinds of meetings? We have user story grooming or refinement sessions where we reach consensus on what's to be built and how it's to be tested. We use tools like BDD to refine our understanding of requirements, as well as to drive tests into a test automation pipeline, which brings us back to the DevSecOps. All of these things can fit together.
So I am very glad to hear that Rex disagreed with me. I don't think he intended to, but what I heard was we definitely need to tailor that verbiage. We need to use the DODs and DORs and acceptance criteria versus entry and exit criteria. We need to, use planning poker instead of a separate testing effort estimate. So why not go in and make the documentation more relevant to what's really expected in an agile world instead of people having to guess? So And yeah, Agile doesn't mean no documentation. We definitely still need documentation, right? So yeah, unfortunately, we still got to document some things.
That's
All right.
not Agile.
More, or should we go to, so we had someone who suggested that SP 2.3, define entry criteria, is likely less slash non-relevant in Agile. How would you react to that?
Oh,
Which one? Which practice? Say that again, Tom.
SP 2.3, define entry criteria is less slash non-relevant in Agile.
so I'll take that. I've got to disagree with that. I would say that this is just a matter of thinking about, what does ready mean, right? I mean, I've seen plenty of organizations where they launch into developing code and thinking about testing for user stories when they haven't gotten their heads around what those things mean. And then either the users come in or the business product owners come in the middle and try to clarify, and it's a big disaster, or they get it at the end and it doesn't work, or they're like, no, that's not what I wanted at all. So I think that practice is very, very important. We need to think about what it means to be ready to start developing tests against a user story. Is this user story actually ready for testing and code?
Thanks, Rex. Let us go to the next question.
So as painful as this might be, I 100% agree with Rex on this.
To be honest with you, as someone who lives in the facilitation world a lot, I think you are both agreeing somewhat loudly and, just a little bit out of sync. So I think there's a lot of agreement there. But regardless, the next question, and who's going to
I'll try to be more obnoxious.
Okay. The TMMi focuses on big upfront planning, big upfront design, rather than executing and adapting. Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. And I've already stated it all throughout this. TMMi, great waterfall, iterative, needs more work on Agile. Definitely a lot of focus on planning. I mentioned earlier test policy, test strategies, test plans. Then once we get to level 3, we start getting into master test plans and so forth. So yes, in Agile, we have to tailor it. But again, because of lack of definition of what is really tailorable and how to approach that in an Agile world, you have assessors out there that in an Agile world are requiring in their assessments or not tailoring those things down to what's appropriate. So we've gone from what we really need is, in most cases in Agile, a one-page test plan. It's probably adequate. But we have assessors out there because the documentation is so ambiguous that still believe all those things need to exist. And so therefore, people are getting incorrect, invalid maturity scores.
All right, so super, done a little early here in terms of this question. Rex?
So, we think about plan, right? I mean, what do we mean by a plan? I mean, a plan is something that helps us think through how we're going to do what we're going to do and communicate that to other people. So again, getting back to a goal-oriented way of thinking about those process areas that have to do with planning, you have to think about, well, what are we successfully communicating to people what we're going to do? Are we successfully thinking through these issues? And so, yeah, it needs to be short It needs to be content neutral. In other words, the plan is not driven by assumptions about what specific user stories are going to be built and what specific iterations. It needs to just say, this is the process that we go through in testing in each iteration. And that's your master test plan, if you will. And then your strategies are about how we do testing across all of our iterations and how we coordinate that testing. Who does what kind of testing? Who owns the performance testing? Who owns the security testing? Who owns the other types of testing that don't fit neatly within a single sprint, that have to be cross-functional and spanning multiple sprint teams? This doesn't require enormous amounts of documentation. And if you create enormous documents in any kind of organization, regardless of the life cycle they're following, nobody's going to read the stuff. So it needs to be short and relevant and to the point. And so this isn't a TMMi problem per se. This is a people failing to understand the information needs of their audience when they're documenting problem. And that's a big issue that I run into as a consultant all the time, TMMi or not.
All right, super, Rex. So we've let's hit the rebuttal. Mark, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think in this case, maybe finally, I think we're on the same page with this. I think, my only heartburn is, again, ambiguity, kills a lot of things, misuse of the specs, misuse of the tailoring guidelines. So I think with more effort, we can make it less ambiguous, clearer as to what it means, to have a test strategy and a test plan and a master test plan. For example, it can be one document. It can be tailored to something as simple as a couple-page document. It's all contextual to your project. So,
Rex, do you want to sew this one up?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I'm starting to hear here, Mark, is that your real problem is not so much with the Agile tailoring part, but kind of how assessors are doing it or not doing it. And anytime you've got a process where experts are coming in and giving opinions about something, you've got the possibility that experts come to different conclusions. I've definitely learned this in my career, and as working as an expert witness, just I'm not shocked that that the other side in a case brings in somebody who says, oh, that guy Rex doesn't know what he's talking about, or he's wrong about this thing. So I think you're pointing at a larger problem than just TMMi. It's the fact that experts do come to different conclusions. So I think the lesson to a company that's looking to get TMMi assessed is choose your assessors carefully. If they don't have a background in assessing organizations that are doing Agile, then they're likely to have a problem with doing it well.
Super. So before we jump to the next question or decide to go on with this a little bit, we had sort of a statement from the floor. Agile does more planning, an upfront plan and planning every sprint. I would go as far as saying that's what a stand-up meeting is, or a daily scrum. If you're using Scrum, that's pre-planning. Also, so how does that fit within this whole idea of a big up plan rather than executing and adapting? Anybody want to comment on that?
I'd like our guru moderator, who's an Agile specialist, to weigh in on that.
To be honest with you, I think Agile does fundamentally more planning. It just spreads it out. And the idea of having something lightweight up front, you have to know where you're going, is important. But very frankly, we, as an Agilist, every day, you go to a stand-up meeting. That's not status. And if you're doing it status, you're doing it wrong. It's what are we going to do today, and what can we do to get stuff out of our way so that we can continue forward. So I actually think TMMi and Agile can work very well together. Again, I like the interpretation. Two interpretations I'm hearing from you two gentlemen, and that's really where the focus should be. So let's go to the next question. I know that Rex has to leave relatively early, so we'll press forward. The TMMi does not place an emphasis on automation, which is important in current frameworks. I think, Rex, you go first on this one.
Okay. Well, I would say, again, this is a matter of if you focus on levels 2 and 3 versus levels 4 and 5, you might come to that conclusion that we're not going to see automation. But if you start thinking about what level 4 and 5 are telling you to do, again, focusing on the goals, and the goals in level 4 and 5 can really be summarized as shift left. Well, how are you going to do that without automation? Automation is going to be necessary to make this to make that work. And so, sure, I mean, TMMi doesn't come out and say that, because of course, if you do put an emphasis on automation, you start to get all into a prescriptive space about what kind of automation are we talking about, and then that gets into becomes problematic when you're, say, dealing with an organization that makes embedded systems or industrial controls versus an organization that's doing something that's all browser based. So instead, what you have is, again, at levels 4 and 5, this emphasis on shifting left, and any organization that's trying to do that in a sort of DevSecOps Agile kind of way is going to inevitably have to use automation. And automation, remember, is just it's a tool. It's a means to an end. It's not a goal in and of itself. And so you really wouldn't want an organization or want a framework where it was all about raising up all this tooling and measuring, like, how many different tools do you have, and how many kinds of open source things can you have in your pipeline, and so on. Really, it's better to just focus on what are the goals that we're trying to achieve.
Super. Mark.
So again, there are no practices and maturity levels 4 and 5 that really are focused on shift left and those efficiencies. When we look at automation, what it means in an agile environment is not this traditional just functional test automation. So quality's evolving, testing's evolving as we move from waterfall to agile. And that's where agile has to, TMMi for agile has to evolve in the same way. So, what are the core tenets of agile and DevOps? Very much involves automation of numerous things. Automation of the pipeline, automation of unit testing, automation of our build process, of building artifacts, of deploying artifacts. All this involves some sort of automation. And why do we do it? How's that tied to the evolving nature of quality? Well, quality isn't about just the discovery of defects. And as we've evolved over time into these types of methodologies, it's more about delivering value in the most efficient and effective way possible. That's what quality assurance is concerned about, not just defect prevention and defect discovery. It's about efficiencies and effectiveness too. So efficiency, how fast we can deliver that value. Effectiveness, what levels of quality and performance can we achieve? So to evolve Agile, TMMi into Agile and make it more relevant, we've got to have practices where we evaluate all the aspects of automation, not just the old school traditional test automation, we've got to take a fresh approach to assessing the capabilities. I have a team that had to invent our own CI/CD automation, or I'm sorry, assessment framework using the TMMi ISO 15504 type of framework. We've had to invent that for traditional automation and invent those frameworks for now CI/CD and DevOps, because it's
Okay.
missing.
So before, instead of a rebut, I had two comments from the floor. We'll handle them separately, and then I think we'll probably need to wrap for the day, given where we are time-wise. And I'll give each one basically a minute for this first one, because it's close to a rebuttal kind of comments. Given more companies target to operate at TMMi level 3, why do you think TMMi doesn't have any practice related to automation at level 2 and 3? So Mark, why don't you first, and Rex, you can go second.
Why doesn't, let me reread that. More companies target to operate TMMi level 3. Why doesn't TMMi practice related to automation level 2, level 3? So, you know, I don't think it, you know, it's a requirement to have automation. So I'm just answering this question with, you know, not necessarily relative to Agile, just in general. There's really not a requirement. I mean, if you can get efficiency and streamline processes, is automation really a requirement? No. That's why TMMi doesn't include anything about automation, because it doesn't really matter if you're automating or not. If you're able to deliver high levels of quality, and you through test optimization can deliver efficiencies in addition to the high quality and so forth. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be through automation that we gain those efficiencies and effectiveness of testing.
Super. Rex?
So I would say that the question really is more properly directed at our pals at, excuse me, at the Software Engineering Institute, that because the kind of automation that we're talking about in DevSecOps kind of world spans well beyond the realm of testing, and it really needs to be a whole of development kind of approach. And so I'm working with the client right now on something that I've been recommending to clients for quite a while, which is to have a unified test automation strategy that spans all test levels and all test types. And that gets you into the areas of that are really more properly the domain of software development, right? And so I would say that this is something that really ought to be redirected, as I said, to SEI, so that they could start thinking about putting that kind of thing into the CMMI framework, which would really be more properly where it would belong, because it would encourage that cross-functional approach.
Okay, super. One last comment from the floor from Sean, and I know there's been some discussion in the chat on this, but Sean mentioned, so if I had to sum up what I'm hearing, TMMi can be tailored and used successfully for organizations employing Agile and DevOps, and probably DevSecOps. The problem occurs when assessors mechanistically, yep, that's the right word.
That's a word.
Look at the goals, practices, and don't understand the organization's substitutions. Rex, why don't you give us a minute on that, and then Mark a minute, and then we'll call it a day.
Sure. So I like the word mechanistically. I tried to fix your pronunciation. I did something similar recently when I was criticizing people who take that same kind of approach to the automation pyramid and try to quantify their pyramidicality, which is impossible, because the test automation pyramid is a metaphor, not a metric. It's exactly the case here, where yes, if you get hung up on the details and you're trying to measure this in terms of documents and evidence and heavyweight rituals that are associated with waterfall, like sign-offs and so forth, you're missing the point. The point is the goals, and the point ultimately of the whole thing, again, when you get up to levels 4 and 5, is shift left. So, are we doing testing in a way that is going to support that very much DevSecOps Agile type of shift left thinking, at least where we should be thinking? Then TMMi aligns with that.
So obviously I was playing an antagonist role today, but the reality is TMMi fits very well into Agile. Just got to be intelligent about equivalencies, right? And that's really the key here, is understanding the intent of assessing that goal and that capability, applying it to, how does that really work in an Agile environment? So those of you that are looking for assessors, that's what you want to look for, is in an assessor, someone that has that knowledge on how to tailor it, has that deep background in both traditional testing, deep background in agility, and have that capability to apply those equivalencies, use some common sense, and it works great for Agile.
Well, I know that Rex needs to leave at this point.
Well, I would just like to point out that Mark has effectively conceded the debate to me, so there hardly needs to be any sort of scoring. But if you would want to score on the chat as to whether they're, the audience is pro or con, we could go through that as a final form of driving home the last nail into the coffin.
So
con conviction position.
I apologize if I made you look bad today, Rex.
So I do think Rex is right. So TMMi, friend or foe?
Rex for president. Wait, he's already president.
So TMMi, friend or foe in the chat, please.
Oh, Simon. Oh.
Friend. Excellent. Lots of friends.
Acquaintance.
So before we leave, ladies and gentlemen, the TMMi, we didn't get through all the purported myths. Maybe we'll do this again. TMMi is a nonprofit organization. TMMi America, a nonprofit organization also. Our mission is to support organizations and their software and system testing. We're really a nascent organization starting to build this out, really focusing on getting the TMMi understood across the industry here in America, North America. We have memberships at this point. We'd like to invite people to become basic members. It's free, valid for a year, has access to our newsletter. We also have a premier membership, the actual having a website and all that stuff. We need to do a little bit of funding, pay for the Zoom account, things like that. $25 a year, United States, valid for a year, access to the newsletter also. We're going to have a Slack community, something along those lines, access to webinars and lean coffees, some of which we'll pull behind the wall so that it's just premier members. And if you hang around for a while, help out, those sorts of things, you can run for the chapter board in 2 years.
Hey, you forgot about the 8x10 of Rex.
There you go. We will get you.
That's part of the premiere, right?
Signed 8x10.
Absolutely. Our website, tmmiamerica.org/become a member. Use the link here or the that
QR code.
Yeah, I don't use QR codes often, except at the Mexican restaurant for lunch. So they've got no menus anymore. It's actually cool. Excellent. So again, thank you, Rex. Thank you, Mark. This has been absolutely marvelous. It's a fun format. We'll be sending out a survey to everyone. get some ideas on our next webinar and what you thought about the format. This is a little bit different, and we had a lot of fun doing it, and both Rex and Mark are actually friends. So all this aside, the goal was to not only provide information, but to at least have some fun on a Friday afternoon. Thanks, everyone. Have a marvelous rest of the day and a weekend, wherever you are.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Tom, for moderating. It was good fun. Look forward to doing more of these.
Great job, guys. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.